72 films spanning from the mid-60s through the early 80s were deemed too violent in their original forms for the UK's impressionable youth of the 80s. These 72 films, mostly consisting of low-budget horror films, had to either be cut or banned entirely. These 72 films forever have a stigma attached to them. These 72 films make up the video nasties. Now, I shouldn't have to explain what video nasties are or what impact they had on society. As horror fans, you should have a general idea, but if not, it was basically the UK's way to censor movies being produced. As you know, during the mid-60s through the early 80s, horror films were trying to push the limits of what could be shown on screen. We got some gnarly exploitation films during this time, and the UK government had enough. The UK Parliament enacted the Video Recordings Act of 1984, which censored what was allowed to be seen, bought, or released. Obviously, when you tell someone that they can't have something, they instinctively want it more. To some collectors, these 72 titles are the holy grail of horror cinema. They live in infamy and have a reputation to them. They will forever be the video nasties. Even though some video nasties are truly deserving of their sought-after reputation, like The Evil Dead, Last House on the Left, The Beyond, and Tenebrae, others are just awful films. So, the video nasty pedigree isn't necessarily a seal of quality, but instead just a reminder that something happens in the film that made the censors deem it too violent or grotesque for the average moviegoer. Now, even though I haven't seen all 72 of these films, I've seen the majority of them, and have reviewed over a dozen of them, and tonight, I get to do it all over again. Should the Slayer from 1982 be remembered for more than just being a video nasty? Well, let's find out together. Welcome to the HellBound Horror Show. Well, after watching it, I can confirm that the story and setup to the Slayer is honestly a pretty simple and straightforward affair. We start on a grisly nightmare. Some flashing images and then something pulls her into the darkness. This is Kay, and it was just a dream. Her husband wakes her up. This is a dream that she has very often, and she uses this dream to help her with her art. Kay, her husband, her brother, and his wife all leave on a plane to go to a remote island to have a little vacation away from civilization. When they get there, everything looks so familiar to Kay. She's seen it all before in her dreams. She's even painted pictures of some of these locales, like the abandoned theater. The pilot of the plane warns them that a storm is forming over the ocean and will soon be on the island. Once the storm comes, travel won't be safe. The gang decides to rough out the weather. I mean, how bad can it get? Well, when the rain comes, so do the murders. Each of the 4 friends get picked off one by one in typical slasher fashion. Now, this isn't a traditional whodunit sort of slasher. This is a supernatural one. Anytime Kay dreams, someone dies. There's a creature, a humanoid monster, haunting Kay's dreams, and every time she sleeps, the monster gets closer and closer to reality. Can Kay stay up long enough to ward off this beast, or will she too fall victim to the Slayer? The Slayer has so much going for it. The characters are relatively fleshed out. The film has room to breathe, and we get to connect with some of them. The location of Tibby Island is great. It's a stunningly isolated location. Acting is solid for a low-budget horror film. These actors are a little bit older than the teen actors we get in most slashers, which is a nice change of pace. The highlight of the Slayer is the gore effects. We have some really nasty stuff here. Unfortunately, there's only a handful of kills and not every one of them is great, but for what we do get, it's all pretty awesome. The best one by far is the pitchfork kill. This is what got the film put on the video nasty list. To achieve this shot, they built about a 6-inch rig of her chest that they rested on her chest. They had to film it from a certain angle to give it the right effect. Luckily, film is not great with depth perception, so the puncture looks real. I've slowed it down so you can appreciate it more. Originally, they wanted Tom Savini to do the gore effects, but they didn't get him. Instead, they went with Robert Short, who did a great job. The killer's design was also phenomenal, but I'm not going to spoil that here. Cinematography by Karen Grossman is pure bliss at times. Some shots are breathtaking. Now, the producers were a little upset because some of her cinematography just wasn't scary enough for their liking, so she tried to incorporate some moving camera work from time to time to make it a little bit scarier. Now, even though the good stuff is highlight worthy, the Slayer itself isn't perfect. 90 minutes never felt so long. With a cast of only 4 real characters and an airplane pilot, there's just not much going on here. Yes, we get some interesting character studies, but they aren't written well enough and the film isn't interesting enough to keep modern audiences engaged. But the part that's the worst offender to added runtime is the suspense building scenes. Running around and bumbling in the dark for ages felt the most generic for me. I believe this movie could have been 40 minutes long and would have been perfectly paced. As it stands now, it's a lot of sitting around, and when the good stuff finally happens, it only lasts for a few frames. When the killer finally appears, it's only seen for a few seconds, and then it's gone again. This killer honestly gets less runtime than Jason did in the first Friday the 13th movie. Nitpicking aside, The Slayer is a solid outing for first-time director J.S. Cardone. The film is drenched in this coastal, damp atmosphere, and it has its moments, but the overall pacing feels slow. To be honest though, most 80s slashers can feel a little slow. Due to budget constraints, the money usually went into special effects, and these movies basically became waiting until the next kill. Sure, some of these movies may have more interesting characters or better plots, but they are just so formulaic that veterans of the genre tend to notice the similarities. If The Slayer was your first slasher, then I'm sure it would be much more impactful. It came out at a time when slashers were booming, and while it does have super high highs, they only last for but a moment. I recommend The Slayer to any 80s slasher enthusiast. Yes, it will be a tad slow, but there are moments of pure bliss. And if you're just getting into slashers, there are other movies that better encapsulate all the positives the subgenre has to offer. And that's all I have for tonight. So thank you so much for watching, and stay spooky, everyone. I can't believe you made it to the end of the video. Fantastic. What's your favorite slasher film that no one talks about? I'd love to know in the comments below. Thanks. Bye.